You're not going to want to believe this, but Minnesota Democrats have introduced legislation to kill our most vulnerable adults. They're calling it medical aid in dying, but what it actually is assisted suicide. And in an attempt to pull the wool over your eyes, within the bill, they're actually trying to redefine definitions. They're trying to redefine what suicide is. And that's not just a claim on my part. Here are the receipts.
Section 14 does two things. It specifically prohibits medication delivery via lethal injection, lethal infusion, and prohibits participation in criminal acts. And it specifies that actions taken in accordance with the chapter do not constitute suicide, assisted suicide, homicide, or anything along those lines.
I'm struggling to find a movie from when I was younger, and I think it was 1984, the book, where we changed terms, and pretty soon the firefighters are the ones that are actually starting the fires. And that is another thing that really strikes me about this is now we're going to have the doctors who have supposedly dedicated their lives to saving people, and now that they're aiding them in suicide.
Suicide occurs as a result of a mental health crisis that drives individuals to take or try to take their own lives, usually impulsively and often by violent means. They are self-destructive and not in a rational state of mind. This is very clear when you talk to them. They are generally in an agitated state of perceived helplessness, hopelessness, and desperation and despair.
So we're supposed to believe that somebody who's facing a terminal diagnosis and has, according to a doctor, 6 months or less to live is not experiencing hopelessness, helplessness, desperation, or despair? Very obviously they are. There's no actual clear distinction between that circumstance and any other suicidal ideation.
I'm here to speak in opposition to this bill in regards to Section 14B, which states actions taken in accordance with this chapter do not for any purposes constitute suicide, assisted suicide, or other terms. This is not accurate. Any definition of suicide will show this is about suicide. And the Council on Ethics and Judicial Affairs of the American Medical Association states, quote, ethical deliberation and debate is best served by using plainly descriptive language. Despite its negative connotations, the term physician-assisted suicide describes the practice with the greatest precision. The terms aid in dying or death with dignity could be used to describe either euthanasia or palliative and hospice care at the end of life, and this degree of ambiguity is unacceptable for providing ethical guidance.
Medical aid in dying is an end-of-life option similar to discontinuing renal dialysis or other life-sustaining treatment, or the decision to stop eating and drinking.
That's obviously absurd. No longer eating or drinking is not on par with literally causing your own death by ingesting a toxin. You're taking an active, affirmative action to end your own life as opposed to refusing treatment or refusing care. Those are not in the same category at all.
This bill is not about medical aid in dying. Every physician who works with the dying already prescribes many medications to take care of symptoms at the end of life. We all do this, and we don't need a bill to provide that. This bill is about legalizing physician-assisted suicide and making it a standard of care that the American Medical Association states is unethical and, quote, fundamentally incompatible with the physician's role as healer, would be difficult or impossible to control, and would pose serious societal risk.
We've heard that this poses a serious societal risk, but I would push back and say that it's been passed in 10 states as well as DC, and we haven't seen society collapse.
I find it telling that when concern is raised over the societal harm that this bill risks, that the example that we have to go to, the extreme that we have to present in order to combat that notion is complete societal collapse. It seems a little odd to me that the only possible form of societal harm is the total collapse and shutdown of society. Now, perhaps harm to an individual ought to be a high enough concern for this committee.
Because it is suicide, it will have the effect of undermining our other suicide prevention efforts, likely lead to increased suicide rates, and therefore is a threat to public safety. Please do not move this bill forward.
Check out how awkward things get when lead Paul Novotny in the Public Safety Committee tries to pin Representative Freiberg down on what the difference is between what he's proposing and any given suicide.
You specifically lay out several other ways to commit suicide. What's the difference?
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Novotny. We heard from Dr. Berg that people who are experiencing suicidal ideation are often agitated and not in a right place of mind. People who use medical aid in dying don't want to die, but they are already dying. They've been diagnosed as having a terminal illness. It's not easy to talk about, but I think there is a clear distinction between somebody who uses medical aid in dying and somebody who dies by suicide.
Lead Novotny.
So Chair Mueller, we've got a little time. I'll dive into that, and I'll ask you the question as a guy who did 30 years of responding to death scenes, including suicides, 6.5 of those years, dedicated to investigations. My question, and maybe I should have been more clear, if someone meets all of the parameters that you've laid out, but they don't choose the state-approved method of suicide, and the state path to get there, what's the difference?
Representative Freiberg.
As I said, the people who use medical aid in dying are already dying, and they.
I'll go back to my.
Wait,
Sure.
hang on a second. Go ahead, Representative Freiberg.
I can also call back Dr. Berg if you'd like. I think he's more familiar.
We have
with
to move on to a vote, so I don't think we'll need to call him back at this point. But did you have any?
No, that's fine.
Okay, Lead Novotny.
Chair Mueller, the question is, someone that they've met the state-approved method of committing suicide, they've checked all the boxes. Maybe they've even been provided the state-approved method of committing suicide through what you call medical-assisted suicide, but they just choose a different path. Their medical certificate or their death certificate is changed, and they've committed a crime. What's the difference, really?
So I think he's already answered this question, and perhaps you didn't like the answer. But we can keep asking it again and again and not moving forward. So.
Well, I can't help him move forward and not answer the question. So.
Notice how the chair runs cover for Representative Freiberg because he cannot provide an answer.
Cumulative longitudinal data from 11 U.S. jurisdictions with MAID show no substantial cases of abuse or coercion. No civil or criminal charges have ever been filed, not one. Disability Rights Oregon has never received a complaint that a disabled person was coerced into using medical aid in dying. MAID's safeguards for patients and penalties for would-be abusers work.
My name is Greg Deckard. I am an attorney. I've been practicing in the state of Minnesota for 36 years. I own and practice law at a law firm in Maple Grove that specializes in estate planning, estate administration, and elder law. Much of our practice focuses on representing elderly clients and clients who are disabled. I'm here to testify in opposition to the proposed bill as it relates to the lack of adequate legal safeguards for protecting our state's most vulnerable citizens. There are many more, but I will mention 4. First, the supposed safeguards in this bill are an evidentiary charade, because Section 13 will rarely, if ever, be enforced. There simply won't be reliable witnesses. When an attempt at coercion is successful, the patient will be deceased. I have tried many will contests, and my office routinely litigates issues of coercion, undue influence, duress, and lack of capacity. These legal theories are easy to allege, but they are extremely difficult to prove in court, and this bill does nothing to protect our state's vulnerable population in that regard. Second, only one witness is required, and this person may be a complete stranger who knows nothing about the patient or her medical history. In other words, it will be easier in this state, in terms of the signing requirements, to get a dose of lethal medication than it will be to execute a simple will or a trust or a power of attorney or even a healthcare directive. Third, once the medication is prescribed, there is no oversight over the pills. There is a provision for disposal, but there are no penalties. This medication could be used on vulnerable people, and we all know that autopsies are almost unheard of in cases involving the elderly or those with chronic illnesses. Fourth, once the pills are prescribed, there is no requirement that administration be witnessed. There is therefore no way of knowing who administered the pills, whether it was the patient or some other person with bad intentions. And because it's presumed the patient self-administered, this statute invites abuse by estate beneficiaries.
Section 13 of House File 1390 is concerned with coercion of our frail, elderly, and dying patients, as it should be. My dying patients are among the most susceptible to coercion, undue influence, and other forms of exploitation. This law, however, is in its essence coercive. The new law sets a standard of care for medicine, for me, medical aid in dying. Then it obligates all providers to inform those dying patients of all options, including this new standard of care. At each decision point with my dying or frail patients, I must inform them of the option of medical aid in dying. This repeated so-called informed consent begins to set an expectation with my vulnerable patients that perhaps their life is not worth living. So rather than supporting my patients, providing dignity and comfort, I am forced to remind them that we could end their life prematurely. These discussions between physicians and patients, whether we like it or not, carry tremendous weight, and by forcing me to inform them of this new option, should the bill pass, is coercive in its very nature. I believe the bill should not be passed. Thank you for your time.
I think this notion that we are all surrounded by homicidal individuals who are ready to pull the plug on people because of potential gains in estates is simply inaccurate.
The idea that we need not worry about abuse, we need not worry about bad actors, that's the only reason this committee exists. Public safety. We exist to deal with the fact that there are bad actors in our society. And we need to be very careful in our actions to ensure that we're illuminating the blind spots and putting up the safety nets to prevent abuse.
If we move forward with this moral premise around suicide, we really don't have a rational, objective argument to present to a teenager who's depressed and wants to end their life, because they too can claim that my life is finite, that it all means nothing. In the end, I'm going to be in the ground anyway, so why not end it all? And there's really nothing that we can say in response to that if we pass something like this and as a state express that the meaning of life is found in its quality. If you really think that the meaning of life is found in its quality, then you have given up on the fundamental reality that we all face every single day of our lives, which is that quality must be found in our day-to-day interactions and our relationships, and in how we spend the time that we've been granted by our God or by nature, however you see it. The idea that there is some value other than the life that we've been granted by our circumstances is obviously incorrect.
Again, I'll echo Representative Hudson's concerns of how human life in recent years, and it's been ongoing for a long time, is more and more being devalued in the society. And that should terrify all of us. That should terrify all of us. Human life is a gift. Human life is something to be treasured from conception until natural death. That's the bottom line, folks. When we open Pandora's box and allow something like this to come in, I think we all have to be very, very cautious and mindful how much we are going down a path of darkness to destruction.
I don't want to argue about statistics and things that I know we're not going to agree about. What I just want to speak to, two things, and I'll be done. One, I really think what should center all of our deliberation on public policy is the value of human life, its intrinsic value. And I dislike the characterization of that as an exclusively faith-based or cultural idea. Objectively, the standard of value is life. There's nothing else, literally, nothing else. There's no reason, no basis for morality. Morality is the code we utilize in order to make decisions. Why? For what purpose? What makes a choice good or bad? Objectively, a choice is good if it furthers life. This does not. And I also dislike the idea that the only path towards dignified death is jumping off the cliff, causing death. That's where dignity is found, in causing death, not in enduring, not in those last years, those last weeks, those last hours of persisting. Dignity isn't found there, apparently. It's only found in checking out. That's a weird premise, and I don't like it.
Here's the fact of the matter. We are all suffering a terminal illness. Upon our conception and birth, we are destined to die. Every single human being has a finite amount of time left to live on this earth. And so the idea that when you have some diagnosis that gives you a more precise estimate of when your end is, that this somehow justifies you taking your life, is entirely arbitrary.